Hello and welcome to A Loose Carry. I'm your host, Phoenix Trinidad. This is Zero Tackles, a weekly show where we chat all things NRL and rugby league. We were previously the Offload. We had to change the name. We're now Loose Carry. Doesn't matter. Let's just move past it. This week, we are talking about the Panthers. They're coming off 2 losses in a row. Will they remain at the top? It's a big ask, but I think they might be in store for a big year. Latrell Mitchell, when he does return, what position is he going to be playing in? And which coach is under the most pressure? We're only just after round 3. We're already talking about which coaches are under the most pressure. It's a big year. It's a big episode. Let's get to it. And joining us for Loose Carry, the first episode technically of Loose Carry, we have Darren Parkin, as always. How are you, mate?
Going well, yeah. We've offloaded the name and gone down a different path. So, here we are. Another fascinating week. Plenty of storylines, so probably more off-field than on-field, even if the on-field action threw up plenty as well.
Yep. And making his return to the channel, Retro Rugby League. How are you, Retro?
Yeah, going well. Hopefully the change in name isn't reflective of our performance today with too many loose opinion, but I think we'll be okay.
And the man who keeps zerotackle.com running all week, fresh off his cricket finals, Scott Pride. How are you, buddy?
Phoenix, yeah, another good weekend of footy. Cricket's over for me now, so looking in hard for the footy for the next 5 or 6 months. Looking forward to getting into it. Plenty to discuss today.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, let's get to it. All right, so first thing on the rundown, Darren, Panthers coming off 2 losses. How far will they fall in 2025, or is it not panic stations at this point?
Yeah, not panic stations. I mean, the points differential at -6 had that good win over the Sharks. Last week was a shock, and then they were competitive, certainly, against the Melbourne Storm side that, are tipped to, again, make the running through the home and away season and are probably the number 1 seed, even though the Panthers are the 4-time reigning champs. So, I mean, I guess just a couple of those defensive numbers. So Penrith have conceded 90 points in the first 3 rounds, which is the most in a 3-week period since May of 2019, so nearly 6 years ago. It's the most in the first 3 rounds of a season for them for 14 years. So, and they're conceding 22 plus in 3 straight games. They did that last year, but they actually won 2 of them. So, and the last time it was 4 in a row was the middle of 2019. So probably just a few of those concerns over their one-wood, which is their defensive squeeze that they put on teams. That sides are getting through them a little bit. Now, Sharks and Storm, that's not going to surprise too much, but Roosters did. And I guess on the flip side, the Storm come out of it with a few injury concerns, not enormously long-term, like to use a couple of weeks, Meany, a month or so, and a Sofa Solomon a concussion, so that's the mandatory 10 days. But yeah, I think if I was forecasting a Panthers decline, I'd be premature, but I guess some of those numbers suggest they've got a couple of things to think about that normally work much better for them.
Yeah, and Scott, on the Storm side, how do you think they can handle those injuries? Because those are some pretty big names that are out.
Yeah, some huge injuries for Melbourne. Obviously, Jerome Hughes, he only gone for a couple of weeks with that broken hand, but he's so important to the way they play their footy. We saw it last year at times when he did miss a couple of games, although he then took out a Daly Cherry-Evans. So it just probably shows you how important Jerome Hughes is to that system. I think the advantage Melbourne have this year is that Jonah Pezze is not injured. Obviously, they spent the second half of last season with Pezze battling an ACL there, so he should be back and probably replace him for the next fortnight, which is a big boost. Nick Meany being out is a huge blow. Meany's sort of been Mr. Fix-It for Melbourne in the last couple of years. Since he moved from Canterbury, he's played everywhere from fullback to the halves, and now he's found that permanent home in the centres. Who comes in there, I'm not sure. Maybe it's someone like a Marion Seve or even like a Moses Leo, and they shuffle their back line around. Not exactly sure how they'll work that, but Craig Bellamy probably has a couple of options to consider with his team selection this week. So for Solomona, he'll only miss the game, probably with that concussion, but again, he adds a bit of firepower to that middle third for the Storm. I think they'll be okay, Melbourne, and we saw it last year. They had injuries all the way through that season, really. They had a massive injury crisis and still finished right up the top. So I think they'll be okay. But, their first real test for the season coming up here. Retro, what do you make of that game? Because what Darren was just talking about there with Penrith, I agree it's not panic stations for the Panthers yet, but, some question marks for sure.
Yeah, it's a bit of an interesting one. I mean, having no Cleary certainly hurt the Panthers, but Jack Cole surprisingly stood at the moment. And that seems to be something that has happened to the Penrith squads over the last few years. When Cleary goes down, the little guys, be it Jack Hogger last year or Jack Cole this year, have stood up. And I think it's that system that allows them to do that. Is it panic stations? No. Are they looking a little more vulnerable than we expected? Yeah, probably. But we are at round 3 and we've seen some weird things happen early in round 3. In terms of Melbourne Storm, they're just blessed with depth. So Jonah, I thought it was Jonah Pezzett. Maybe he's transitioning over to Le Caplan's Dragons and getting his French up, and it's actually been Pezzet this whole time. I don't know, but he's in the mix. You got Falungo in the mix. You got Tyrone Wishart, who's absolutely gun and plays well anywhere. So they're blessed with that depth to cover all those positions. They'll be fine. Penrith, I don't think any cause for concern, but it is a watch this space, and by round 10. The thermometer will be pulled out. We'll see what the temperature really is.
Yeah, so from those two powerhouse clubs to another big potential powerhouse club this year, Broncos taking out the Cowboys. Probably no surprises to anybody but Payne Haas. He is looking like he's in for another big year.
Yeah, I mean, the Cowboys were better. I think that's one thing. They had a crack. It just didn't quite work for them. But yeah, looking at the numbers, I think Payne Haas had, 10 or 11 tackle busts. He obviously hit the scoreboard as well. And if you look at even last year and the year before in terms of averages across the competition, so in terms of totals in that stats, he was ranked 3rd, but played at least 9 less games than everybody else in the top 10. So remarkable numbers in that space. And yeah, you can mount a case in terms of impact on games that he's the number 1 seed within that role. And I mean, the Broncos, they probably needed a bit of a response after, the slip from last week, but it was certainly encouraging, I think, in terms of where they're trying to get back to and shaking some of the 2024 dramas off their back.
Yeah, Scott.
Sorry, Trax.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, the way I look at Payne Haas, he is the best prop in the game for mine. There's really no doubt about it. And I look at that, could you replace Payne Haas with anybody? And the answer is no. Most other props in the competition, you could say yes. Well, his impact will be enormous, but you certainly can be replaced. That's not the case with Payne Haas. He just adds so much to that side. I mean, he played big minutes against the Cowboys, ran for 200 plus meters. How do you stop him?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Scott.
Absolutely.
I mean, usually when we're picking, so you choose between big, fast, and mobile. You've got all 3 with Payne Haas. That try you scored at the end, I could not get in that near switching that fast the way he busts through that line. A lot of backs would struggle to keep up with him. When they did those preseason trials and he was the first one winning those races up top Mount Cootha, he's a freak. You will never see another guy like him for at least the next 10 to 15 years. So, yeah, Brisbane played better when Haas plays better. The squad is lifting around him, and I think there's a lot of things to like with Brisbane this year. Cowboys having a dig too little, too late. I can't see things getting much better for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Payne Haas to me just seems like somebody that he almost seems like ancient. Like if you traveled back in time 1,000 years ago, he'd be somebody that's on the front line, and the army would just turn away because we're not getting past that guy. But in terms of somebody that is an absolute superstar, going over now to the Knights. Are they a little bit too reliant on Kalen Ponga, Scott? Because you spoke about how Brisbane for them. Payne Haas is irreplaceable. For the Knights, it's Kalen Ponga even more unreplaceable.
Yeah, and we've seen it each of the last 2 years when Ponga's been out with concussion. The Knights don't really have a plan B. If Ponga's out, they don't really have a lot. Both of the last 2 seasons, in fact, Ponga's missed substantial time and Newcastle has spent most of that time losing. He comes back and suddenly they're competitive again. They've made both of those final series, but on the back of Kalen Ponga. The question is, and I think it's something that's been raised time and time again over the last 24 months, are Newcastle too reliant on Kalen Ponga? And I think the answer is yes, because you look at the game against the Titans on the weekend where they've scored 6 points, right? And he touched the footy 50 times, made 2 tackle busts and only 132 metres. His impact missed the mark, and so did the Knights. They had nothing really. They dropped the ball a lot. They had no structure, And it seems that their plan A is pass the ball to Kalen and see what happens, which is just not how you win games of footy. Newcastle have got to find a way around that. I think they have been impacted by the quality of their halves over the years, over the last couple of years in particular. But Adam O'Brien needs to find a strategy that is not just, hey, there's Kalen, let's see what he can do.
Yeah, it felt like we asked that question end of the previous season, end of this season, and 3 rounds in, we don't have an answer to the contrary of what we already thought. So, yeah, that they are far too top heavy and far too reliant in that situation. I mean, the winning percentage drops by about 27, I think, when he doesn't play. So it's just far too great an impact, and certainly not his fault, but a situation that they've got to find a way to rectify. I mean, they're a chance to drag themselves into the lower reaches of the 8 again, but if they want to go beyond that, then obviously things have to significantly change.
There are some shining lights for the Knights. So on an edge, Brandon Best and Greg Marju is a scary combination. Huge boys, very fast, very strong, powerful runners. They just don't seem to get their opportunities as well. And the other one is Fletcher Sharp. Looking electric. There was a try they almost scored in the first half where he's just bouncing around. But of course, with Dylan Brown coming to the club next year, and maybe earlier if that happens, what happens to Paul Fletcher Sharp? Because we're not putting Kalen back to 6. We can't put Fletcher to 1. Is he really a 14? I fear that he may get lost in the wash, and he's looking like their best hope. That's not Kalen at present. So not really sure what the answer is to the Newcastle boys.
Either. And I think Dylan Brown adds a bit, but also, and I said it on the show when we were discussing his contract after he first signed, that I don't think he's done anything to earn that contract. I don't know how much he improves Newcastle. The combination, if you like, between Ponga and Brown could be very, very exciting, and that might be the answer for Newcastle in terms of not having your plan A as pass the ball to Kalen and see what happens. Maybe that's the thought process behind going out and signing Brown on this monster deal that he simply couldn't turn down. But I just think the rest of this season, they need to find a way to, you're right, there are bright lights there, Retro, but they need to find a way to have Ponga be more in for with less touches of the footy. It's saying that, you look at a fullback like James Tedesco, and he plays his best footy when he's actually not touching the ball quite as much at the Roosters. It's something that I've been marked a couple of times over the last couple of years, where when his receipts of the footy go up, his production actually goes down. And I think it's the same with Ponga in Newcastle to an extent. He hasn't got the same quality of players around him, mind you, but they need to find a way to get the ball out of his hands a little bit more and make him more impactful with the touches he is having.
Yep, absolutely. So some interesting stuff there. Speaking of contracts, so Retro DCE, there's a bit of a contract update to his situation. So he's now he's got an evaluation on his value. Sorry, so 400K is where DCE's at the moment.
Yeah, so for people that are unaware, when it comes to contracts, a club or the player can't just set their price at any willy-nilly price. There is a salary cap ordinary who comes along and says this is a fair market value for this player. Now, generally, you'd expect a halfback, I think, to be worth a minimum of 6, 7, 800,000. The NRL have come out and evaluated DCE at a whopping $400,000. Now, where they got this figure from, I do not know. Whether they're trying to be nice to Manly or what, I'm not sure. That bodes well for Manly if they want to cheap, put DCE on the cheap. Can't see that happening. There's actually much more to this contract than just money. So DCE wants 2 years. It looks like Manly are keen on offering 1 and then just rolling 1-year contracts. But to me, it's a no-brainer. You give DCE whatever he wants. And there's multiple reasons. 1 is you want stability in the club. The premiership window is open. You want to keep him there. 2, if you have new guys coming through, even an injured DCE is a better halfback coach than you're going to find anywhere else. 3, you want guys like that just sticking around the club to be Manly boys. But what? Outsiders looking in, when you're going to a new club and the club is trying to pitch you an idea of why you should sign with us than anyone else, having someone like DCE that you care of is a good sign if I'm looking to sign with you. Because I know I'm going to that club and I'm going to be taken care of. That's a bargaining chip that they have a very small window to actually take opportunity to hold. So they'd be very silly to not give DCE whatever he wants for at least 2 years and work things out from there. Darren, how do you see it playing out though?
Yeah, it's a decent haircut. And obviously there's already the speculation around, does he go on and then brings in the equation, does he go somewhere else? Yeah, I think in terms of that market value, clearly they've looked at age, whether they've tried to forecast a decline that naturally comes with those sorts of things, I don't know. But yeah, I agree. They've been pretty kind in that space, and I think there's a lot more layers to it, as you've alluded to, and a lot more steps that have to sort of come about. So looking at, you say, like on the open market, I think there've been speculation of around 800,000, so that's double the netted figure. So there's an enormous discrepancy there that obviously needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I mean, let's get one thing, I think, clear. DC is not going to sign his next deal for $400,000. I think with multiple clubs rumoured to be chasing him, I know the Dragons were one. I think there was a couple of others as well that were interested to throw their hat in the ring for his signature. I think 400K is a crazy figure that's going to get blown out of the water by the actual contract offers. How high they go, I'm not sure. How high Manly can go, I'm not sure, because we know Manly's salary cap is a bit how you're going with some pretty top-heavy deals there for the Trbojevics and a few others. So I think there's some real issues there for Manly if they do want to keep DCE, and he obviously is going to chase some sort of payday, being what will be likely his last deal in the NRL. I'm with you, though, Retro. I think if he wants 2 years, Manly offer him 2 years because they need to keep him as an off-field coach. I think that's the biggest thing he brings to the club. Manly have got Joey Walsh coming through. He's going to be their next halfback. I don't think there's any doubt about that. He's the long-term Daly Cherry-Evans replacement. And for him to learn off DCE for the next 2 years would actually repay DCE's contract value, I think, 3 times over the next decade.
And there's some other suitors in the market. The talk is, of course, Redcliffe Dolphins. The not Redcliffe Dolphins that they might be interested in here. And that would be like a big homecoming for DCE. To be honest, I can't see it happening, but they'd be more cashed up than anyone, with the exception of the Roosters, which they did fly up as a passing comment, but I think that's just the obligatory comment everyone has to make. So I don't see DCE leaving Manly, and the 400 valuation helps because they'll just rack up those third-party deals up to the gilt. So I think things will look good for the brown and whites, really.
From a personal point of view, obviously you want to climb the mountain one last time. You turn 37 next year. Where's your best chance of reaching the top of the summit? And you'd say Manly ahead of a couple of those clubs, certainly ahead of the Dolphins, if you want to lift the trophy one more time.
Yeah. So you're going from one of the contracts from one of the best older players in the league to two of the best young talents coming through. So at the Tigers, Talon De Silva and Lockie Galvin. So De Silva, Scott reportedly has about 4 clubs going after him. Also, Galvin going to be testing the market in November 1. So how do the Tigers retain that duo? Because they want to keep them, obviously.
Yeah, it's not a matter of how, it's just a matter of they need to, they have to. De Silva and Galvin are the future of that club. De Silva's an excellently talented young hooker, and we've seen what Galvin's produced on a weekly basis in the halves there for the Tigers recently. So there's no ifs, buts, or otherwise. The Tigers need to find a way to retain both of those players. It's going to cost them a pretty penny. There's no doubt about that. Galvin has been umming and ahhing about his future for the best part of 6 to 9 months now. And how he plays it out, I'm not sure. There's been talk that the Eels, the Roosters are going to go after him, so he'll have a big decision to make with some pretty impressive clubs. I think there was even talk around a potential $1 million 10-year deal type scenario for Galvin, which to me is insane because he's had a season in the NRL and we're already talking about making him a 7-figure player, but that is his potential and his ceiling. It is very, very high. It's hard to remember a young half coming through as talented as him. De Silva hasn't had the same level of opportunity yet, but there's no doubt that he's next in line for that number 9 jersey at the Tigers once Apasai Coruscant does hang up the boots or moves on, whichever comes first. I think the interesting thing about the Tigers there is that De Silva and Coruscant are off contract at the same time at the end of next year. Both of those guys can go to the open market from November 1 if they so choose. And I think it's going to be difficult for the Tigers because if Coruscant wants to play on, they almost have to give him a new deal purely based on the fact that he's your club co-captain and he has been one of your best players for the last 2 or 3 years. But does that come at the expense of moving De Silva on? I think it's a really intriguing situation, Retro.
Yeah, the way the clubs are building these days seem to be in that Melbourne Storm frame. If you pick your best 3 and you build around them. And currently, if we're talking Luai, De Silva, Appy, and Lockie Galvin, that's 4. So we've got to make a choice, and we need to make a budget choice there. I would think in the long term, they'll probably pick De Silva over Ponks out for the long-term play and hope that the littlest man with the biggest eyebrows comes through. But Galvin, I think for me, he's the guy you go after, and you do splash $1 million over 10 years to lock him down. With like recently with the ratcheting clauses in contracts that they do have a route. And so that could have a good long-term buy impact if the Tigers look to pursue him. I think that's a no-brainer. Don't forget that some of the Eels speculation resulted because Lockie Galvin liked the comment that someone left about the Eels. That was it. That's as far as it went. So I think he will stay a Tiger, and I think the Tigers would be mad to do anything else but you're right, Scott, working out all the pieces around him, that's the tricky bit. That's what the good clubs get right.
And you wonder whether the, that monster Brown deal at the Knights, it looks like that's changed the market dynamic in many respects for long-term deals and, obviously other clubs that then, coming to the table with different sort of situations and different prices. So, yeah, it's a changing game now, that's for sure. But as you say, the good sides generally get that right. And the Tigers, it's only 3 weeks, but they're planting the seeds of something that looks a little bit better. So the decisions they make from here are very important.
Yeah, all of a sudden there's a lot of $1 million contracts getting handed out. I reckon I'm in the frame for one of those soon, based on how many are going around. All right, probably not, but anyway, Darren, we'll stick with you. How so? Latrell Mitchell coming back in, I think a few weeks. What position should he be returning in?
Yeah, it's been suggested around 5 or 6 from that injury in the off-season. He was such a massive talking point coming into it with whether Wayne Bennett could squeeze the best out of the problem child, so to speak. But Wayne Bennett seemingly squished any talk around it a couple of days ago by saying that the number 1 jersey is his. Obviously, Jai Gray's been amazing, really, in his absence and helped the Rabbitohs sort of punch above their weight to a degree in the early part of the season. But, Wayne Bennett saying that the decision is not up for grabs. Fullback's his spot. He's the number 1. He enjoys being there. We enjoy having him there, and he'll be starting there as soon as he comes back. But then what do they do with Jai? Does he come off the bench? Do they try to find some other role for him in there? But, Wayne Bennett, I imagine, calls it as it is in that situation, and I think he wants to get him right and feels that he can carry them forward. So it looks like that decision's pretty clear. Scott, can you see them going another direction, and how much has Jai Gray complicated the equation?
Yeah, not immediately. I think Latrell definitely takes the number 1 when he comes back and has some weeks to impress. South certainly need an X factor or something to drag them along. Obviously, they've lost Cam Murray for the season and some other issues there as well. Does Latrell stay fullback long term? I really think it depends on his first month back. If he plays well, yes, definitely. If he plays poorly, there's going to be a real question mark around whether you move him to the centres or what you do with him, because Jai Gray's done enough over the first couple of weeks, I think, to really challenge for that number 1 jersey. And, let's be honest, Latrell sometimes struggles on the consistency front, which is something that Jai Gray doesn't seem to do. He works hard. I know he's very small in stature, Jai Gray, and doesn't bring the same, strength and aggression that Latrell Mitchell does. They're 2 very different players, so Wayne Bennett's got a decision to make. One thing that Wayne Bennett has to worry about is trying to keep Latrell happy. He knows that Latrell is probably his most important player, particularly with Murray out for the season. So there's that to worry about as well. But, for mine, yes, Latrell starts there. I'm just not sure if he stays there. Retro?
Yeah, if he doesn't stay there, there'll be a lot of media tweaking and storytelling that will reinvigorate him as the player that we always thought he was as a centre or a 6. Whatever Souths have to do to spin the yarn to make Latrell believe it will happen weeks in advance before he actually lands in that position. You're right. He will play full. There's no 2 ways about it. Even if there was some games a couple of years back where Wayne was there, where he started playing at other positions, but he still had the 1 on his back because it's up here for Latrell. We know that. He's too good to be not with his hands on the ball and the high impact player, but he needs to believe it. So whatever Wayne can get him to do to believe is highly important for them. Jai Gray, I think, will just be a casualty of, unfortunately, success around him because you've got Cody Walker and Jack White and other guys that it's just kind of too hard to ignore to slot him into a 14 spot, unfortunately. But Trell really is that guy that will take you from 15, 14, 16 to 3, 4, 5. So whatever has to happen, let's make it happen for the Bunnies. So, you watch the media and the storytelling will begin weeks in advance before you see a change.
You see, it's interesting because I've always thought Latrell is actually a better centre than he is a fullback. That's just the way I view it. I think that Origin series where he and Tom Trebojevic were New South Wales centres and the Blues won just went to prove how dangerous he is in the roaming position where he's given a bit of freedom to play from centre but also play around the field. And I just wonder if Wayne Bennett would potentially get more out of Latrell in that sort of a role where, you play at centre, you defend at centre, but in attack, you are allowed to roam, you are allowed to go and get your hands on the footy. It gives you an extra attacking weapon, almost two fullbacks in the same team, and Queensland couldn't deal with it. So I'm just wondering how many club teams could deal with something like that. No, I think the answer is not many.
You're probably right from the point of view of whether, clubs could handle it or not. He would be too damaging. Whether he would get the quality ball he needs or not out there, that would be the big thing. And I think Latrell, you risk in clubland him switching off. You just got to keep him on in any way you can. In the future, I think he will turn into a Greg Inglis style 6, but he's not. Not yet. That's sort of the conversation for now.
Yeah, still a lot to play out. So moving on now to where post round 3, coming into round 4. So we're not ready to sack any coaches yet, but we are putting the pressure index on a few. So Eels, Cowboys, Dolphins, all 0-3. Retro. Which coach out of those is under the most pressure? Also, Dragons 0-2.
Yeah, so I think any talk of Christian Wolf or Jason Riles being sacked is ridiculous. I mean, we're three rounds into I think Jason Riles has a 5-year contract or something like that. And don't forget how Cameron Ciraldo's first 2 years played out at the Bulldogs. Just throw that out the window. They are not going anywhere. Todd Payton is an interesting figure because, a couple of years ago, everyone was after his signature. Now things aren't looking so great. And the hardline stance that he took at the beginning that seemed to work so well seems to have like a little bit of Michael Maguire effect where it's maybe not resounding anymore. So I'm not sure what the solution is there. Shane Flanagan, I'm also pretty convinced is safe as houses. That's George. But there is maybe a little bit of lingering pressure over Trent Robertson at the Roosters for this year. But I don't know what it would take for the lid to be opened up there. And that is something to keep your eye on. But I don't know, Darren, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Payton, if you look at, it's an odd one on the Cowboys. They've had a top 4 run a couple of years ago, a semi-final run. So they've gone prelim and semi over the last 3 years or thereabouts. It is a hard style. There is a fair bit of expectation on them. The start's been a little bit iffy. He's admitted that there's pressure on. It feels like that would be the one. I agree. If you're new to the seats, that there's got to be that area. But we often judge coaches by, expecting the progress to be linear. It's probably hard if you go forward, backwards, and then one backward year is enough. You'd think that there's got to be that level of time to adjust, and not all progress goes the same, at exactly the same pace. But I think given where they've got and the fact that the Cowboys would feel that they are, close to breaking through, that's when clubs often blink and think, is this the one that's going to push us into that top echelon? Rather than a side that might be in a, what you call a rebuild phase. I think those that feel that they're only 5% away from contending, I think they're the teams that will often be the ones that blink and make those sorts of decisions.
It feels harsh that we're talking about Todd Payton like this, given the Cowboys actually made the finals last year. But I think there's been a very much a long-standing thing with Payton where the Cowboys have always had a roster that feels like it should be going better than it is. And that's been a trend of Payton's coaching since he took over the club. The start of this year has been a disaster. There's no two ways about it. They're 0-3 and haven't looked quite troubling. They were a little bit better against Brisbane on Friday, but I really don't think they ever looked like winning that game or knowing how to finish it. And I think where you look at Payton and the way he is feeling the pressure, he dropped Jeremiah Nanai to go and work on his defence. Lasted 1 week and then he recalled him. That, both of them's a coach not really knowing his own plan, that there are some alarm bells ringing there in Townsville for Payton and the Cowboys. So, yeah, I think he's under enormous pressure. And if things don't turn around quickly, I think we're going to start to see more and more of that rhetoric in the media, which will only then add to the issues for the players. They'll rock up to press conferences on a Thursday and all the talk will be about, well, do you still have your coach's support and all the rest of it. So that then adds to that and more pressure. And we've seen this story play out 100 times before. So if the Cowboys don't start winning in the next couple of weeks, I think Payton would be as good as a dead man walking in his role. Your comment about Trent Robinson is an interesting one, Retro. I do think he could find himself under pressure next year if the Roosters don't turn things around next year. I think this year is a write-off, and we all know that there'll be no real issue there this year for Trent Robinson. But if they start next year 0-4 on the back of this year, then comments will start to fly a little bit. I think the other couple of coaches that you could look at, I know they've started the season probably a little bit better than we would have expected, but I think Des Hasler is a massive watch this year at the Titans. They had a disaster last year, and their team I'm not sure where their selections are going up there this year. Adam O'Brien is another one at Newcastle where you just go, how long does he really have? He's been rumoured to be on the hot seat the last couple of years. We spoke about Calvin Ponga earlier in the show. If they miss the finals this year, I think he's in massive trouble as well. And then Ricky Stewart's the other one in Canberra. He's I think he'll be there, but mainly because no one else wants to coach in Canberra.
Yep. All right. So moving on quickly now, Scott. So we've got a couple more things to get through, but Billy Slater has confirmed that Braden Trindall could be on the radar for Queensland. So what do we think about that in terms of Origin?
Well, I don't hate the call. Braden Trindall's been in wonderful form the last sort of 12 months. And the fact of the matter is he outplayed Nicho Hines last year. And you could argue he's doing it again this year at the start of this season for Cronulla. His game has come on in leaps and bounds really ever since that suspension in the middle of last season over an off-field issue. And I don't think you'd look at a place at Origin level. He's certainly not the first name that comes to mind. And if Queensland are 1-17 or fit for their best 17, then he's certainly not going to challenge the likes of Cameron Munster and Daly Cherry-Evans. We don't know if he's actually going to play, same as Ben Hunt. So there's some questions there around Queensland, just whether those two guys retire, and that could open a spot for Trindall. He wouldn't look out of place, though. Retro, what do you make of it? Because his form has been pretty good.
He's a dangerous little runner. Like as a Blue, I would be scared in tackle 4 on defending our line with him running at the line. He's just a nuggety little guy. He's fast. He's deceptive. Is he the guy who's going to take that spot right now? Look, I wouldn't think so if you've got a healthy DC and Munster. You've also got, don't forget, in and around the scene, Tom Dearden. And if Queenslanders are going to be Queenslanders, and Billy Slater assures us that that's what they are, Queenslanders, then Dearden will surely be in the frame because they don't like leaving people behind, right? Till it suits them. So we'll see what happens with that. He's that guy who could be in the mix. But don't forget, you've also got Ben Hunt. And if we see Ezra Mann come back with some flying colours, he could be in contention too. So it's great for him that he's in the mix. It's a boost to his confidence. It's absolute pick that he is playing well. I wouldn't put him in the 6 jersey just yet. Darren?
Probably not. I mean, the progress has been good. Career best season coming into another strong start. So the body of work's there. Reading Billy Slater's comments suggests that, he's thought more than a little bit about it. But yeah, there's a lot of, capped experience in that space that they can call upon. So yeah, I'm not as convinced, but he's certainly making the right noises, that's for sure.
Yeah, love the Origin talk in March, and I think Billy Slater having a podcast is definitely going to be adding to the continuous Origin talk every week. So now let's just round out the show with our tips as always. Coming into round 4, we'll go, in terms of order, we'll go Darren, Retro, Scott. So Rabbitohs versus Panthers, Darren.
Despite what I said earlier, Penrith's still going okay. They win.
Yeah, it's the risk for me.
Penrith all the way here.
Roosters, Titans.
Tricky games. Roosters just.
Yeah, Roosters have a good record against the Titans, so I'm going to pick them.
Yeah, I'm going the Roosters with no confidence.
Yeah, me too. Dolphins, Broncos.
Broncos by plenty.
Yeah, it's Broncos for me. Yeah, Battle of Brisbane won't mean much for the Dolphins this time, unfortunately.
Yeah, pick a number. Broncos by plenty.
Dragon, Storm.
Storm, but banana peels.
Yeah, but Storm for me.
I might cry during this one. Melbourne.
Cowboys, Raiders.
Cowboys to fight the pressure off for a week. I think they'll sneak in.
Wow. Lime milkshakes all round for me. It's Raiders.
Sounded a tough place to go play, but give me the Raiders.
Yep. Sharks, Bulldogs. Probably game of the round, this one.
Yeah, very good game. Dogs just a couple out, though, so I think the Sharks will get them.
Yeah, I think Sharks will grind in a low-scoring game.
Yeah, low scoring, agree for another though.
Seagulls, Eels.
Yeah, I think Manly by plenty.
Maroon and white for me.
Yeah, Manly by 40 plus.
Lock it in. Tigers versus Waz.
Tigers could easily be 3-0. I think they'll get their third win on Sunday, though.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I'm going to go the Tigers. John.
I'm going to go the other way, Warriors. But yeah, again, no confidence. Good game, that one.
Yeah, it's going to be a banger to close out the round. Obviously, I'm back in the Waz. So that wraps it up for a loose carry this week. Thank you, fellas, for coming on. Darren Parkin, you'll be all around Zero Tackle. Scott, what have we got coming up on the site?
Yeah, plenty going on site as always. Make sure you get your tips in for round 4. People are loving our tipping comp with the dynamic odds. We were chatting about it off air, Retro. You're getting around it. And plenty of weekly content on Zero Tackle all around wrap up on Monday and Tuesday. And then we'll start getting ready for round 4 team list 4 o'clock Tuesday as well. Don't forget to check them out.
Beautiful stuff. And Retro, where can the people find you? What you got going on?
Following @retro_rugby_league, like Peter Volandis would say on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Doing little game day stuff this year. So if you're going to a game, make sure you're wearing your best, fanciest retro jerseys, and I might just be interviewing.
Yeah, I got the Retro Rugby League follow back on Instagram this week, so it's been a pretty good week for me. Lots of good stuff going over there on your account. All right, and that wraps it up for us this week. Join us next week for another big episode of Loose Carry. New name, have fun, and up the Waz.